Here's another objection to which Mill wants to reply. Somebody might say to Mill, look, if I'm a utilitarian, don't I have to always be calculating with regard to anything that I do? Everything from whether I should send a check to try to fight famine on the other side of the world, or maybe even hunger here in my hometown, or whether I should even decide to tie my shoe right now. I don't have time to calculate, because every time I've got to perform an action, I have to do this kind of philosophic calculus to determine whether or not the prospective action is likely to produce the greatest overall amount of happiness, or at least the greatest amount of happiness for myself and those that I care about? Mill's answer is as follows. The answer to the objection is that there has been ample time already, namely the whole past duration of the human species. What does he mean by that? I think Mill has in mind the following, that for as long as humanity has been around, we've been learning rules of thumb and passing them on by what biologists and anthropologists will call cultural evolution. We've been passing them on by teaching our children precepts of various kinds that help us navigate life. Mill calls these intermediate generalizations. Sometimes he refers to them as secondary principles. Sometimes he refers to them as subordinate principles. In the days when word processing was not as efficient as it is now, we can forgive him for using slightly different terminology for what I think is the same idea. He writes, only in those cases of conflict between secondary principles is it requisite that first principles should be appealed to. So let me try to explicate that a little bit. Here are some examples of what you might call intermediate generalizations that are probably things that you learned at the knees of one or the other of your parents or whoever raised you. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. That's a throwback to the 70s. Many hands make light work. That is, if you want to get something done, have somebody help you. To err is human, to forgive divine. People make mistakes, and it's a nice thing to forgive them when that happens. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is, try to apply a sort of golden rule in your behavior. Industry pays debts while despair increases them. If you're trying to solve a problem, work hard to pull yourself out of the hole as opposed to sitting around feeling badly for yourself. Two wrongs don't make a right. I was told that many times when I was a child, as one of my parents would pull my brothers apart from fights that we get into all too often. Just because one person's done something wrong doesn't mean you can solve it by doing something wrong as well. Or don't look a gift horse in the mouth. That is to say, when someone gives you a gift, don't ask questions about whether it's a gift that you really want to accept. Just be gracious and accept it. These are precepts that we just learned and we accept unconsciously nowadays in our lives as we live our daily lives. To thine own self be true is another, perhaps a little bit more ambitious one, but try to be true to yourself is the idea. Follow your own instincts. Don't necessarily do what other people tell you to do. So the idea is that these are precepts, and you can think of thousands of others, that we live by on a daily basis and that we can use when deciding what to do instead of a careful, detailed, philosophic calculus, as it were. Now, Mill will say there can be sometimes collisions, and when there are collisions, that's when you might have to calculate. So take a look at, for example, to thine own self be true to yourself, and don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Suppose somebody gives me a gift, maybe it's a horse, maybe it's not, but I feel there's something fishy about this gift. It gives me a funny feeling. There's something kind of maybe Trojan horse about this. There's something about it that makes me feel like perhaps I'm being exploited, or there's a trick involved, or a string attached. Then if I'm going to be true to myself, I might indeed have to look this gift horse in the mouth and ask some questions. So here's a case in which don't look a gift horse in the mouth is going to come into tension with and maybe clash with to thine own self be true. These collisions happen. And Mill will say, here's a situation in which you do have to do a philosophic calculus. You do have to do a calculation to determine what is the right action. So Mill would say, before accepting the gift, go back into your office or study or back to your cafe, open up your laptop, whatever it is, and do some thinking to decide what is the right thing to do. Consult with your friends, etc. Mill's going to say, that's not necessarily an objection to my theory. Of course, he's going to say, there are many cases in which it's very difficult to know what is the right action. I'm not saying that the utilitarian theory makes ethical decision-making easy in all cases. I'm saying it gives you a method. Sometimes it can be difficult to follow that method, but no one would object to physics on the ground that sometimes physical calculations are complicated. That's just the way the physical world is, and Mill will say, likewise, that's just the way the ethical world is. Sometimes life throws at us a complex problem.